right, now we're going to take a look at some best practices when selecting an area of interest and defining it with the polygon tool. So going to start out with a few cases of bad practices. So first off, I'm going to take a look at a polygon that was drawn on this I-195 project. Now, this polygon is shown in an area where it was drawn with just the driving lanes, not the shoulder, which is good. But you can see it overlaps a bridge area as well as non-bridge. So just regular roadway on fill. This is problematic because usually bridge decks have very different surface characteristics and usually even different material types. And so in general, we don't want to mix the two material types in a analysis as that can throw it off. Next, we've got an area where the shape itself, the polygon, was drawn to include not only driving lanes, but also the shoulder areas. By mixing these two in the same shape, again, we've got an area where very different traffic patterns exist and different traffic loading exists. So by including shoulder and drive lane, that can also affect the analysis. Instead, we want to try to separate these out. All right. Next, we've got an area that shows both mainline driving lanes as well as a gore area with no traffic. That's shown in the white chevrons here in the middle. And then we've got a ramp lane. Ideally, we would try to keep the mainline lanes in separate shapes from ramps. But in addition to that, we also have this issue where the median gore has been included in the shape as well. And so at the very least, we want to make sure we get that out. But then also we would want to separate out the ramp from the main line usually. And next, we've got one area where sometimes there can be very large shadows that are on the roadway itself. If they're smaller ones, such as the trees that we see on the right-hand side, that's not a problem. But when we have large shadows, especially from buildings, that can be problematic. Due to the dramatic difference in the aerial imagery of the surface from shadowed area to areas that are in the sun, that can affect it. And so in this case, we would want to do one of two things. Instead, either break this up into two separate shapes, one just for the shadow area, which is perfectly okay, and then one for the sun area. Or what we can do is also create our own aerial image through a separate platform such as Google Earth, ArcGIS Pro, QGIS, and then generate a geotiff from that and upload that and do the analysis on that from a time period where the shadow's not in place. That'd be another option. And then finally, last example here. When we're developing the polygon shapes, one thing we do not want to do is go ahead and overlap the edges. So if we're trying to get one specific area and then we go ahead and click to overlap and undo, what have you, this can cause issues. And so instead, when we're placing shapes, we always want to make sure we're not crisscrossing back over the boundary itself. Just keep it one continuous boundary, don't cross over it. Now, one other example of a bad practice is going to be very small areas. And so if we draw a polygon that's very tiny, that can be problematic because we do want to try to include as large of an area as possible. That helps provide much more refined analysis with the results too. And so too small of an area can be problematic for us. Then beyond that, we've got areas that have a lot of traffic all at once. And so this can be more common around intersections. And so if we need to grab a section of a aerial or satellite image where the traffic is stopped, that's where we may want to instead take a look at trying to get a different aerial from a different time period. Or in some cases, we may have to go ahead and use this. And so in situations like this, try to see if there's a different time available and then upload that as a geotiff to do the analysis. Or if one is not available, then go ahead and do the analysis here, but just make sure you're comparing it to the aerial image itself to identify if the vehicle spots are being picked up. When it's very heavy like what we're looking at here, sometimes that can be problematic, so you just want to double check that in the analysis results. All right, now to move on to good practices. So in this case, if we want to go ahead and process an area at this particular bridge, we can go ahead and place polygon for the bridge deck itself. Keep in mind some bridges have approach slabs, and so usually you can tell by the color in the aerial what should be included, and just try to keep the color and full bridge limits included in the polygon. Now, with that, by keeping it separate, that allows us to go ahead and then continue our analysis adjacent to that particular area. And so again, even with bridge decks, we do want to keep shoulder areas separate. And with that, we can go ahead and start drawing the next polygon. And so here, again, we're keeping the driving areas separate and allowing us to analyze that with those best practices in place. And the same thing goes for the shoulder. Even though it's a shoulder area consistent all the way throughout, the bridge deck shoulder is going to have different characteristics. So if we wanted to process that, we would still want to go ahead and keep that in a separate shape. Again, trying to be approximate with the polygon itself. And as you can see, we're able to just continue on processing as we go. Now, when we get to the shadow areas over here, for best practice, main thing we want to do is make sure we're separating these out into separate polygons. That way we're keeping fairly consistent aerial settings in place. And so here we've got the shadowed area that we'll analyze. And then right next to that, we can go ahead and analyze the area between the bridge and where that shadow polygon begins. And so with that, we'll go ahead to zoom to draw, and then we're able to go ahead and process this area separately from that. So again, now focusing on driving lanes where we don't have any differences in surface type or characteristics. Then another area is going to be at ramp entrances and exits. So we've already got one polygon drawn for all of the driving lanes. We do have the ramp lane, in this case an auxiliary lane that exits, but we can continue that to the gore. After the painted gore, usually we want to go ahead and separate this out into a separate polygon. And so at this point we can go ahead and place our separate polygon for analysis in order to capture that specific area.